The main thing I had a problem with is the third act of the film. At the end of the second half, Balin finds Johnny and Gilda. I think this is what happened. Found Johnny and Gilda kissing in her room, and then he goes off and flies away, and then his plane blows up in front of everybody, so everyone believes that he's dead. But the movie lets you know right away that he's not. He made it out to look like he was dead, so you know he's coming back to a certain point. What I thought was going to happen, essentially, is that Johnny was going to run amok and essentially treat Gilda like very toxically, and that relationship was going to go to a whole other level of toxicity. Because throughout the film, Johnny adores Balin, will do anything for Balin, almost to a point where he loves Balin to a certain point. I'm not going to be one of those people who think this is a gay movie, because there is a deeper relationship between two men. That's not what I'm saying. But it's clear that Johnny has some affection to Balin to a certain extent. So he was kind of probably felt some guilt about Balin dying after watching what happened with Johnny and Gilda. That's kind of what happened, but not really. In the third act, Johnny, quote unquote, gives in to his romantic impulses and marries Gilda right away. But because he knows Gilda and knows how she is, he treats her like a prisoner. She can't go anywhere. She can't do anything. She's followed by one of Johnny's henchmen, and Johnny runs Balin's old business, so he's in charge. To a certain extent, they try to make Gilda... They try... It feels like they artificially try to make you feel sorry for Gilda, which, of course, you're going to. No one wants to be in that situation. But they try to do two things at once. The film wants you to feel like Johnny is justified in a strange way in doing what he's doing, and make you feel that Gilda doesn't really deserve this, even though she is a person that can't be trusted and is fairly duplicitous. And that's a weird dichotomy. I think if they spent more time on that, it could have worked, but the amount of time they did spend on it wasn't deep enough and didn't really work very well. And then you're supposed to believe at the end that Gilda really loves Johnny in the end. He's always loved Johnny, even though he spent most of the time insulting her, hating her, being disgusted by her. And then Johnny goes and runs away with her. That ending was weird. And the ending, of course, is Balin comes back. He comes back to murder both Johnny and Gilda. And the servant who's been insulting Johnny this entire time saves him. I mean, he does have sort of a relationship with Gilda. So maybe you can say that he tried to save Gilda in that sense. But this is a character that literally looked around and went, doesn't bother me, whatever, who the fuck cares? But then you're all of a sudden wanting to believe that he cares enough to kill another man for a bunch of people who A, didn't care about him, and B, he supposedly did not care about. Yeah, that's a little weird. That I had a hard time with that. And that's where my feelings of, this is a film of X time, an audience expected X to happen at the end of every film, and we don't subvert the audience. We don't like to upset the audience. We don't like to show the audience something different. So we're going to give them that. And that's disappointing. It's a sign of, it is a part of the times around that time. So I'm not surprised by it, but I am disappointed. I thought about how this movie would be made today if they were to make Gilda today. And they would essentially up the sexiness in this. Like, it would be less a femme fatale and more of like a Cassandra or a sexual goddess of sorts who ensnares, like I would say, like a Black Widow, and someone who ensnares the men sexually in a way where they get into her grasps and she subverts them and puts them into her hands by sexually gratifying them, which isn't Gilda in this movie at all. So I think that would be weird. I don't think writers nowadays could write Gilda the way that they would, that she was in the 40s, that they would do today. They would give Gilda a lot more agency, which wouldn't work in this movie. You have to play within the confines of that time, where it's the men who have all the agency, and this is a woman who, despite not having much agency, is going to grab it any way she can. And it's that kind of desperation, I think, that gives this character more believability and makes her much more interesting. If you were to set it today, I don't think it would come off that way. I think it would come off as someone who's being much more manipulative in a bad way. Not in a way of surviving, but in a way that she just can. And that would be very hard to make Gilda today feel like if it was remade today. It would make that character, I would say, feel more sympathetic and more likable to watch than anything. I think, honestly, if they were to make her today, she would just be a bitch. She would just be somebody that would be detestable. You wouldn't want anything to do, and you wouldn't be able to like her in any sort of way. And unless you really change things up, like almost to the point where it would just not be a movie, it would not be Gilda. Like, you couldn't set it in, I think you couldn't even set it in a casino. You would have to set it in a drug dealing cartel, essentially, is where you'd have to set it. And that brings in its own kind of weird complications as well. So this movie, I don't think, could be remade today. You can do shades of it and draw inspiration from having a character like Gilda in a movie today, but it would be really hard to do something exactly like Gilda today, I think, in this. Yeah, the men characters are not that deep. I mean, you learn right away that Johnny is not a trustworthy person. He cheats when he can, and that's just what he does. He's willing to lie, even though he makes himself out to be very loyal to Balin. Yeah, but that doesn't really change very well. I mean, he still remains loyal to Balin to the very end, I think, to a certain way. But Balin is the one character that I think needed more time. Gilda, at the end of the movie, says that Balin was insane, and he was not a good man and everything. But the way that the movie makes you feel is that he may have not been pleasant to be around, but it was because of Gilda. So I would have liked to see more scenes in that movie where you could define Balin more as someone who is more unsettled, who is, I guess, more insane, or more of a person that should be feared, without making it look, well then, see, okay. But if you do that, does that lessen the power of Gilda? Because part of Gilda's charm and what makes her an interesting character, that even though she's in a situation where she has no agency, she is still a very independent woman who you think could take care of the situation on her own if need be. Would it be a good idea to put her in a situation where then she has to ask for help? Would it lessen her character? Would it lessen the power of her character? It might. So that might be, the writers might have written themselves into a situation where, in order to give more depth to Balin, it might hurt Gilda. So that could be an issue. I mean, they might have written themselves into a hole there. That's really it I can think of when it comes to spoilers. I still very much like the movie, but I could see that there is issues in this movie, and I'm not a fan of the ending, to be absolutely honest. I don't hate it, but it could have been better. It's still, I think, a very good movie, and it's because of Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth makes the movie. Okay, so let's get into the final discussion for Gilda. Gilda is a 3.5 for me, a 3.5 out of 5. If I liked the ending more, I probably would have given it a 4. But I'm comfortable with 3.5. Rita Hayworth makes this movie. She is fantastic in this. Probably one of the better performances of a female actor that I've seen in a while. Like, in a long while. And part of it is that, especially with the way the character is written, she's sexy without being overtly sexy. She's attractive and beautiful without using that to her advantage to a certain extent. She's quick-witted, smart, and intelligent, and Rita Hayworth uses those aspects to build that character up without overly relying on her sexiness and her beauty, which I think made this performance really good. I know she was a sex symbol after this movie, and I understand why. She is a beautiful woman, but I think part of what made her a sex symbol after this is not the looks, but it was basically how she performed that character and how she brought that character to life. Maybe it's just me, but there's nothing sexier than an intelligent woman. There's nothing sexier than a woman that can trade barbs and that can talk to you and lead an interesting conversation. That you can look at a woman and say, oh, yeah, she's sexy, but what really is sexy is someone who's intelligent. And that is what made Gilda and Rita Hayworth's performance such a memorable, really well-written character. I do wish the rest of the other characters were written better. I really do. I would have liked a more dynamic and a more fleshed out characters surrounding Gilda. But it doesn't hurt the enjoyment of the movie. I still enjoy Gilda. I think it's a very good movie that I think a lot of people, if you give it a shot, would actually watch, especially if you bemoan that there aren't any good movies with good female characters. This is one. I would say this is definitely one. So 3.5 stars for Gilda. Highly recommend it. If it wasn't for the ending, which went to stereotypical romance territory, I would have given it a 4, but I don't know. I might watch it again some other time, and it might give it a 4, so we'll see. 3.5 stars for Gilda. I recommend this movie.